Rama asked, "Holy Sir, how have these concepts and categories come to be firmly accepted? Pray, enlighten me." We've been hearing about the conditioned mind, how we get into a state of conditioning. And conditioning is about identification. It's about identifying with our notions. For example, the notion of a world out there, or the notion of an individual, the notion of having a body. So what Rama's asking then is how we come to believe in the results of the cognitive process. This is the process of cognition, whereby we form ideas about what's going on. And you get, in extreme cases, you get belief. You get religious belief. These are notions that we form, which we believe are absolutely true. Vasishta continued, "All this is indeed the self. However, even as waves rise in the ocean, the diversity known as the universe arises in the mind. Here and there, the self appears to be kinetic self." So basically there's things moving around. "Elsewhere, the self remains in a static state. The static are inert substances like rock, and the kinetic substances are humans, etc." So that's one way of dividing things up into moving things and unmoving things, or non-moving things. "In all these, the omnipotent self entertains the notion of ignorance, and therefore remains as if ignorant." Well, it's one way of putting it, isn't it? Entertains the notion of ignorance. It's just another way of saying it becomes ignorant. It's the way it's about experiencing yourself in a finite mode. I suppose it's something that we do all the time. We enter into a situation of self-limitation. For example, you as an individual will have many different facets to you, many different social roles. You may be a mother, or a sister, or a daughter, a worker, maybe an office worker, or you have some career. Within that career, you might have a particular place in the hierarchy. And at certain times, you have to identify with one of these roles for certain purposes. There are certain purposes that you need to do this for. And if you're a career woman and you're perhaps high up in a company hierarchy, well, that's all that you're focused on at that particular time. And you'll forget, even temporarily, your role as a mother. It's not going to come into it at that point. Your role as a daughter, or a sister, or a wife, or whatever, or a friend of others. So you enter into a state of self-limitation for whatever purposes. We don't need to conjecture about the purposes. It's just something that happens, isn't it? And the infinite consciousness, when it starts entertaining thoughts, which is what it does, this is a whole mode of understanding, a whole mode of experiencing, is through being able to think about things. But in doing so, there's a process of self-limitation here. In order to experience this aspect of itself, the self forgets its true nature. So this seems to be a natural process, doesn't it? A process of self-forgetting, of forgetting aspects of oneself, of forgetting the whole picture even. Forgetting the whole picture and focusing on aspects. So just as we have various roles within our life, various aspects to our the individuality. When we focus on one particular aspect, we're not thinking about the whole picture. In fact, we really do, even in terms of our own personality. Although sometimes we might feel the real me is not being addressed by all these different roles. somehow the real me is being forgotten. So there's that vague uneasiness which I think a lot of busy people have. We've got all these different roles. We've got all these different roles, but where's the real me in all this? So we enter into self-limitation and we forget the big picture. In all these, the omnipotent self entertains the notion of ignorance and therefore remains as if ignorant. The infinite, thus clothed in ignorance, is known as the Jiva, who is like the trapped elephant in this world appearance. So the Jiva is the individual. Because it lives, it is known as Jiva. Because of its egoistic notion, it is known as the ego. Because it discriminates and determines, it is known as the buddhi, or the discriminating faculty. I think this can be understood as the intellect. The intellect is what discriminates and then groups according to categories. Because of its ability to form concepts and percepts, it is known as the mind. Being natural, it is called nature. Being natural, it is called nature. That doesn't really tell us much, does it? Perhaps the translation could be a bit clearer. I suppose the point we're making is this is natural. What I was saying about the process of self-limitation, it's natural. So because maybe we could read this as being natural, this is its nature. It itself is known as the body because it changes. Well, does the infinite change, or does it refer to the body? It itself is known as the body because the body changes. We do tend to get attracted to change. It's changing things which attract our attention. And the body's always changing. The body's always doing something. And that becomes our focus and our identification. It is known as consciousness because its nature is consciousness. And that's the infinite. The Supreme Self, which alone is the truth, is right in the middle between the inert and the intelligent. That alone creates diversity and is known by all these diverse names. So it's in the middle between the inert and the intelligent. So is this like the same thing as between the rocks and moving things? Or is it referring here to the body and the mind? The body being inert and the mind intelligent. So the Supreme Self, which we can understand as the attention, is moving between the body, identifying with the body, and which also means identifying with notions of an external world, or it can identify with the inner self, with the mind. So the attention is between these two. It can go that way, or it can go this way. But we don't really want it to go either way. We want to realize the true nature of the attention, which is the Supreme Self. So in that sense, it's in the middle between the body and the mind, although the mind is also sometimes called inert. But this creates a diversity. It's the attention going on towards all these different things. It's the attention which focuses on the results of the cognitive process. But all these categories have been invented by men of perverse intellect for the pleasure of polemics and for the confusion of ignorant men.